on, Megan here. One of the questions I get the most is why is the stretch so important for muscle growth, right? Because I know you guys have seen the videos back and forth. I keep emphasizing focus on the stretching exercises, stretch, stretch, stretch. And I keep getting the questions from the geeks like myself who always want to know why. And the question is always why? Why is the stretch so important? So for the new subscribers, if you haven't seen the videos from like over 5 years ago, I keep emphasizing the stretch. Quick summary of how I discovered that the stretch is so fucking important. It started with my journey when I was trying to grow traps, right? Because you guys know traps is my favorite muscle growth of all fucking time. I'm obsessed with traps, and it's really what got me into bodybuilding. But so at the time, I was struggling, because I had these fucking narrow ass, I had this wide clavicles. I used to train my shoulders a lot, so my clavicles were really fucking wide, and I had the fucking horizontal natty traps, right? And I kept trying to bring him up, and I was like, man, so I started going through this endless research, right? I mean, I was spending, chances are, if you went to Google and you type traps, trapezius, whatever, every single link was purple because I had already clicked on that shit, right? I looked at every single thing I could find, and eventually I condensed it all into one spreadsheet, right? I started a spreadsheet, actually. And I look for the correlations because I know that a lot of things are involved in people that have great traps. You have steroids, you have genetics, things like that. You have the Nucleus Overload thing. And I want to know what was the number one correlation between all these things. And I found out that it was stretch. How did I conclude this? Anybody will find the same conclusion. I looked at the bro science and the science world, like I always explain, right? First, I looked at the wheelbarrow motherfuckers from Africa. I talk about that story a lot. If you don't know what a wheelbarrow looks like, type wheelbarrow. I'm going to put a picture on the screen. A lot of you guys are rich as hell, so you probably never even seen one. But that's what people use in poor countries, or even some rich countries who, carry heavy shit, right? So there was the wheelbarrows motherfucker stories in Africa where these guys were loading up a lot of bricks on the wheelbarrows and carrying them back and forth, in the construction sites. And every single one of these guys, mind you, these guys are not fully nourished. They're not in a caloric surplus. They're poor as dirt, right? So they're really scrawny, but there was one thing that stood out on their physiques. Every single one of those fuckers had some humongous traps, right? And there's no, the dumbest person will figure out what's going on. You got people who are doing the exact same thing every single day, Nucleus Overload, right? Every single day, stimulating the fuck out of that muscle. There was not a single contraction, by the way. If you try carrying a heavy wheelbarrow, it's all stretch. And that thing put so much pressure on that. Mind you, as a kid, I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I just thought, man, these guys have great traps. It's when I got older that I saw the correlation. But so they're constantly putting their traps under intense stretch all day long because, mind you, they don't want to do a lot of trips. So they load up the fucking wheelbarrow. All right, so I wrote this down. I put, biggest factor, stretch, right? The next was the Muay Thai guy, the Muay Thai story that I made a lot of videos on. That's the guy in Thailand who was trying to become bigger for Muay Thai competition. And his master told him, hey, grab 2 heavy buckets of water and carry them up and down the hill every single day. Again, every single day. And as a result, his traps blew up. I'm going to put a picture on the screen for those of you who haven't seen the video. And that's all he did. There was not a shrug done. There was not a contraction done. It was all intense stretch, right? Because what happens when you carry heavy buckets of water? Your traps are under intense stretch, right? The third thing was, so I wrote that down. I was like, okay, stretch. The thing is, before I come to a conclusion, I want to see a fuckload of anecdotes before I even go into the science. When I'm looking at the bro science, I want to see a lot of anecdotes from different parts of the world, different professions, different sports, so I can know for a shot of a doubt it's not just genetics, right? So let's keep going. Number 3, I looked at Matt's story. I already talked about Matt's story, which also is a wheelbarrow motherfucker story. Matt, when Matt started bodybuilding, his traps blew up, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, it's just genetics." And me, knowing the whole trap research thing, I was like, "Hey, Matt, what were you doing when you were a kid? Did you do a lot of things that involve your traps?" First, he was like, "Oh, I can't really think of anything." Long story short, eventually he was like, wait a minute, motherfucker. When I was with my dad at a young age, he used to have me carry, I believe it was chopped up wood for the chimney or some shit, and he used to have me carry that, back and forth all the time, and I hated doing it, so I would load up the wheelbarrow. The moment he said the word wheelbarrow, I got like a fucking boner, guys. I was like, oh shit, keep going, because you don't want to tell the person before they finish, because it might influence their response. And he was like, I carried that wheelbarrow all day long, and the next day my traps would be sore as hell. And doing that repeatedly as a kid, Nucleus Overload, guess what? The amount of nuclei in his traps grew, and when he started bodybuilding, boom, they popped. And I heard the same story about from a lot of people. People that used to wear heavy ass book bags and got the same results. Anyway, so that was 3. So I put, okay, Matt, again, I see stretch, no contraction. So that was the 4th one was my uncle, right? My uncle has a great upper back, great upper traps, and he does not shrug, he does not deadlift. He doesn't do any of that. So I asked him, hey, why the fuck are your traps so big, man? And he said, I don't know. Then again, average person would say genetics, right? But I had that spreadsheet, guys. I was like, no, there has to be a correlation. I was like, there has to be something that you do that leads to you stretching your traps one way or another. And he was like, nah. So I started showing him all the exercises. The problem was he was doing split routine at that time, and we were only looking at his shoulder workouts and his back workouts. Eventually, I was like, hey, let me see your entire routine, right? On his leg day, his favorite exercise was lunges. With what? With dumbbells. Heavy ass dumbbell lunges. And the light bulb went off. He was like, oh yeah, I know, you're right. Every time I used to do those, my traps would be sore like hell. Especially when I went a long time without doing them, right? And he said that was like his go-to exercise on leg day. So boom, there again. Walking lunges are pretty much farmer walks. And he's traps were on attention for a long fucking time. So we have that. What was another thing that I had on that spreadsheet? Guys, I had okay. So now I went over to the sports world, right? I looked at the Olympic lifters. They were doing a lot of cleans, a lot of snatch cleans. And I went to the gym and I started doing clean. The first one I started doing clean, guys, my traps were sore for like 6 days. And that was just me cleaning the weight and dropping it back down. So whether you're doing a hand clean or, power clean, whatever, the stretch at the bottom activates out your traps. So I wrote that down. I was like, all right, Olympic lifters, cleans, Plus they're doing deadlifts when they lift that weight up anyway, right? Next I looked at strongman competitors. They were doing a lot of farmer walks, a lot of weighted fucking carries. Massive stretch on the traps. I wrote that down. I put check. Next was powerlifters with the heavy deadlifts. What else? I mean, guys, again, I made this video back in 2012. Go back and watch it. It's called Finally the Secret to Use Traps. I explain every single thing I'm telling you guys right now. So long story short, spreadsheet was done, and I realized, oh my fucking goodness, right? Stretching the traps is the fastest way to make them grow, right? So that was only for traps. Eventually, I was like, you know what? If that works for traps, why not all the other muscles? And then I went back into Sherlock Sword mode, right? I put the fucking hat on, put the investigative jacket on, and I began to, investigate the best exercise for every single muscle. And based on the anecdotes and the science, I realized it was stretching exercises. And I talked about that in the interview that I made with Alex. Chest, weighted dips, heavy dumbbell flies. My back didn't blow until I started doing weighted chins or pullovers. Biceps, preacher curls, emphasizing the negative, or incline curls. My triceps did not take off until I started doing overhead extensions. Look at everybody that has great triceps. I guarantee you they're doing some kind of dips or they're doing overhead, extensions or skull crushes. For hamstrings, what's the best exercise for hamstrings? Stiff leg deadlifts, things like that. So that led me to realize, okay, you know what? The bro science world, hands down, has agreed that stretching is how you grow muscles, not just straps, right? And, I forgot, one more bro science example was myself. So when I discovered this back in 2012, instantly I found out, well, okay, if the traps stabilize the scapula and then their job is to hold your arms attached to your body, and, that intense stretch causes them to grow, what is the best way to maximize the stretch? And that's when I discovered rack pulls. Again, go back and watch these videos. The videos are old as hell, guys. So I started doing rack pulls, and I was too overzealous, guys, because the results were coming. My traps were growing. They were finally sore every single time. And long story short, I snapped my shit up. I already had a week back from deadlift injuries. That made it worse because I didn't warm up. Another thing about rack pull, guys, is that you are so strong on rack pulls that it's easy to get carried away and not warm up because it feels like shit. You're like, why would I warm up with 135? So I'll put a ton of fucking weight and I will rack pull my ass off. I used to love it. Again, you could go back and watch the video. Type Megan rack pull. I used to call them Megan pulls. And eventually, again, I snapped my shit up and I was like, fuck, man, I gotta find a different way to fucking grow them bitches, right? And boom, this is where I fucked up, because once you get your traps or your muscles used to that much fucking weight and that much tension, it is insanely hard to get the same stimulus by simply doing high reps. So I tell people, you got to do both. You can't just do high reps. You can't just do heavy weight. You got to do both. And my traps never went back to that size, even as of now. Every time I feel like my back is getting better, I try to start doing rack pulls again. Boom, I literally fucked up my back probably for life. And then, like I said, my traps shrunk. Now I do upright rows, even though my shoulders hurt. I try to do upright rows. I try to do some shrugs here and there, but I would never get the same results I was getting when I was doing rack pulls. Unless I do insanely high volume on the lighter weight exercises. So that right there confirmed to me, like a year later, that boom, I was on the right track. So all of this is the bro science aspect. How long is this video? Oh fuck, 10 minutes. But yeah, all this is the bro science aspect. Now we go into the science. I'm gonna wrap this up. I find out that, of course, mTOR, the enzyme I'm always talking about, the most important enzyme for muscle growth, is maximized on stretching exercises and on negatives, not on concentrics. Boom. Remember I told you guys, the science always catches up to the bro science. Always. Almost always. So I was like, man, that makes so much fucking sense. That's why there was so many results, And then there was the bird study that I made tons of videos about, the avian study where they put the waist on the bird and grew like 300 to 400%, stretching the fuck out of the bird's lats. There's also the calf study. Check out the calf study where I forgot her name. She had a guy put one leg on the leg press in the stretch position for like, I don't know how many weeks. And no contraction, just on the stretch position, time on the tension. And his calf blew the fuck up, guys. And she only did it on one leg, so you can actually see the difference. Very short amount of time. Pure stretching, When I saw that, I was like, oh, man, like this confirms all my research, And what else on the science world? You have Jacob Wilson. I believe he's in the University of Florida. I'm not sure. But he also did a study on stretching because he wanted to replicate the avian study in humans. Same thing. Long story short, guys, I told you when bro science to science agrees, I look for, I'm already determined that this thing's going to work, right? And then the next two things that are on the checklist is when I try it and it works, and then when I recommend other people to do it and it works. And all four boxes are checked off. The bro science agrees, the science agreed, it worked on me, and it works on the people that I recommend it to. So, guys, stretching is where it's at, You look no further than anyone who's doing heavy stretching exercises. Look at Arnold's chest. Look at Ronnie's back. I mean, yes, these guys have genetics and on steroids and things like that, but you see a huge difference between the people who focus on heavy stretching exercises and the ones who don't, So this is why, hope that answers your question in one mega video. This is how I came to the conclusion. And again, you don't believe me? Go ahead and do your own research. Go ahead, do your research. Look at the same examples that I provided, and you'll come to the same conclusion, Now, that does not mean that you can't do upright rows. It does not mean you can't contract your traps and make them grow. It simply means that from the research that I've done, you're going to get the most results from focus on stretch. And it's not just your traps, guys. Because most of the questions I get is mainly on traps. It's not just your traps. It's every single muscle. That's why the number one program I recommend to everybody is what I keep calling HSP Training. Focus on 3 exercises, heavy, stretch, pump. And I keep saying stretching is the most important part. All right? So hope this video's answers your questions. Again, if you want to see the ones I made in the past, just go to the search bar, type Megan, stretch, or rack pull, whatever. These videos are old as dirt, guys. That's far back in 2012. So, I try to help me help you guys. Don't make me answer questions that I already answered. That one was, again, 5 years ago. That's why I don't mind doing it, explaining it again. But a lot of the answers to your questions you could just find from a simple search. All right, guys. Hope this helps. I'm out of here. Like the video if you like. If you enjoyed it. If you're a new subscriber, don't forget to subscribe. Comment your questions for the next video. That's where the topics come from. And don't forget to dominate your life. All right? I'm out.